The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound echo like a warning. Thomas clicked through the dark web forum, his eyes tired but restless. He had no idea that one wrong click would turn his life into a nightmare. A chilling ping broke the silence, a message sliding into his encrypted chat. The screen glowed with words he never expected. "We see you." He froze, his breath shallow, the walls of his small apartment suddenly closing in. The hum of his computer fan grew louder, almost mocking his fear. Thomas said, "This can't be real, it's just some prank." Yet deep inside, he knew something was terribly wrong. His reflection in the monitor stared back at him, pale and trembling. The shadows around him thickened, whispering of something darker on the other side of the screen. He tried to close the window, but the message flashed again. "You cannot hide." That was the moment he realized he had been marked. Thomas sat rigid, the echo of the message burning into his mind. The silence of the room grew unbearable, broken only by the faint whir of his laptop. He muttered, "They don't know me, they can't." But deep down he sensed the truth. His chest tightened as another thought struck him. What if his personal information had already been exposed? A cold wave of dread washed over him as he glanced at his phone, half expecting another cryptic notification. The narrator observed how Thomas's fear turned to paranoia, his eyes scanning shadows, his breath shallow. He wondered if the darkness beyond the walls hid more than silence. He whispered, "It's not real. It can't be." Yet the fear gnawed at him, unshakable, relentless. Thomas tried to steady his breathing, gripping his phone with trembling hands. His screen was empty, yet he felt eyes on him. He whispered, "What if they're already inside?" His paranoia spilled into every corner. The narrator revealed the weight of isolation pressing against his chest. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, desperate for calm but finding none. He remembered reading stories of hackers destroying lives, identities erased in a single night. The faint glow of the monitor painted his face like a ghost, every flicker reminding him of their presence. He muttered, "This is how it starts." The tension in the room thickened, suffocating. The narrator described how the apartment seemed to shrink with every passing second. Thomas stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth, hands buried in his hair. His pulse hammered in his ears. He said, "No one should know where I am." The creak of the floorboards echoed like footsteps behind him, each sound amplifying his dread. He paused, frozen, staring into shadows stretching across the walls. He whispered, "Am I being watched?" The walls felt alive, pulsing with unseen threats. His instincts screamed at him, but escape seemed impossible. The room was no longer a refuge. It was a cage tightening around him. Thomas stopped pacing, his breath ragged, and turned back toward the glowing screen. Another message appeared, "We know your name." His stomach dropped. The narrator explained how terror transformed into a sickening realization. This was not random. They had him. He whispered, "No, this isn't possible." His trembling hand brushed against the keyboard, his body frozen between fight and flight. The room hummed with invisible menace, each second stretching into eternity. The silence was pierced only by the faint crack of a neighbor's door, reminding him that the world outside carried on, oblivious to his collapse. He understood then. The hunt had begun. Thomas stared at the glowing screen long after the message faded, his chest aching with dread. The narrator revealed his loneliness, the weight of his past pressing heavily. He muttered, "I should have never gone there." Memories surfaced, losing his job, the betrayal of a close friend who ruined his trust, and the spiral that led him into the darkest corners of the internet. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion carving lines into his face. The room felt colder, as if the walls themselves had turned against him. He whispered, "I'm already broken, why chase me?" His reflection flickered across the monitor, not of a man but of someone who had lost too much. The narrator described how Thomas's grief had turned his once bright life into shadows. He opened a drawer, pulling out a faded photo of his sister, the only family he had left. His hand trembled as he whispered, "I promised to protect you." Her death had left a hollow wound he never healed. He believed the hacker's threats would have meant nothing if not for the fear of losing her memory too. His chest heaved, emotions mixing with the icy tension of his room. His voice cracked, "I can't lose what's left of me." He placed the photo beside the keyboard, a fragile reminder of what anchored him in a collapsing world. The glow of the monitors painted Thomas's face in blue, but his thoughts drifted inward. The narrator shared his memories of laughter, warmth, and a family that once held him whole. He whispered, "Everything ended too fast." The hacker's words echoed like vultures circling his grief, picking at wounds that never healed. His hands tightened into fists as anger flared briefly. "Why me? Why now?" he demanded, voice shaking. Yet the fury quickly crumbled into despair. His reflection in the screen looked more ghost than man. His heartbeat quickened, each thump a reminder that he was still here, though part of him wished he wasn't. Thomas rose from his chair, restless energy coursing through him. The narrator described how grief made him pace the room, his bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor. He muttered, "They can't take everything, not again." His eyes darted toward the photo, then back to the screen, torn between past pain and present fear. The apartment felt suffocating, walls pressing inward. He whispered, "If I fall now, I lose her forever." His chest tightened as he braced himself against the wall, his breath shallow. He looked like a man both fragile and unyielding, a survivor weighed down but refusing to let go. The narrator emphasized how isolation had carved scars on Thomas's soul. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring blankly at the cracked ceiling. His voice broke, "I can't do this alone." His loneliness echoed louder than the threats. His sister's absence haunted him more than the hackers ever could. The room was heavy, filled with ghosts of laughter long gone. He whispered, "I need someone. Anyone." His eyes burned as he wiped his face with trembling hands. The moment carried a truth. His pain was his greatest weakness, but also his strongest reason to fight. The hackers had chosen a man already at war with himself. The narrator described how Thomas's apartment became a prison of glowing screens and paranoia. He sat stiffly, scrolling through his files, realizing fragments of his life were already exposed. His heart pounded as he whispered, "They've been watching longer than I knew." The chat window blinked again, another message taunting, "We own you now." His knuckles turned white against the desk, fury fighting with fear. His breaths grew shallow, like the walls themselves stole his air. The weight of betrayal sank deeper as he remembered trusted friends who could have leaked his details. His eyes narrowed, voice trembling, "I won't let them destroy me." Yet his body shook with doubt, caught in the claws of dread. The narrator explained how every sound in the building turned into a threat. A knock from upstairs, a creak in the hallway, all sharpened into knives of paranoia. Thomas stood by the door, pressing his ear against the wood, eyes darting. He muttered, "They're closer than I thought." His pulse thundered as he checked the lock 3 times, sweat dripping down his temple. He felt the world tilt, betrayal creeping into his mind. Had someone nearby sold him out? The glow from the monitor behind him spilled into the hallway like a beacon, exposing him. He whispered, "I can't trust anyone." The silence after was heavier than noise. The narrator revealed how the digital war broke through into Thomas's reality. His phone buzzed violently, lighting up with unknown numbers, each one flashing threats. He whispered, "How did they get this?" His fingers trembled as he scrolled, the texts growing more sinister. Addresses, dates, fragments of his life he thought hidden. His stomach churned as betrayal festered. Someone he trusted must have given them access. He shouted in sudden anger, "Who sold me out?" Yet his voice cracked under the weight of fear. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering against the floor. The silence after was deafening, broken only by the faint buzz of another incoming message. Thomas's anger erupted into restless energy. The narrator described how he tore through his drawers, searching for old drives and papers, hoping to find what the hackers wanted. His hands shook, papers scattered like fallen leaves across the floor. He muttered, "It's here somewhere. It has to be." His eyes were bloodshot, desperation carving shadows under them. Thought of betrayal tightened his chest. He could see the faces of old allies, but any of them could be the traitor. He slammed his fist against the desk, wood cracking faintly. "They won't break me," he said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The narrator emphasized how Thomas felt trapped in a tightening web. His computer pinged again, a live feed opening without his command. He froze as grainy footage filled the screen. It was his apartment, captured from a hidden angle. His breath hitched, chest pounding like a war drum. He whispered, "They're inside." His eyes darted to corners, searching for cameras, sweat soaking through his hoodie. His reflection on the screen merged with the footage, man and prisoner bound in one. The horror sank deeper. The hackers weren't just digital phantoms. They were watching his every move. His voice cracked, "This is war." The narrator described how Thomas realized he could not fight alone. Desperation led him to dial an old contact, Jake, a troubled figure from his past. His voice cracked, "I need help." Silence hung heavy on the line until Jake finally spoke. "You shouldn't have called me." Thomas gritted his teeth, replying, "They're watching everything. You know what that means." The sound of Jake's sigh carried years of regret and hesitation. The narrator emphasized how Thomas clung to hope, even as doubt gnawed at him. He muttered, "If you don't help, I'm done." For the first time, there was a flicker of possibility in the darkness. Jake's reluctance bled through every word. He muttered, "You don't know what you've stirred up." Thomas's jaw tightened, anger colliding with desperation. He said, "I don't need your warnings. I need your skills." The narrator explained how Jake, once a hacker himself, had buried his past under layers of guilt. His hesitation came not from lack of ability, but from the fear of being dragged back into the abyss. Silence stretched, broken only by Thomas's whisper, "If you walk away, you'll hear about my death on the news." That truth pierced the line. Jake cursed under his breath, torn between fear and loyalty. The narrator described how Jake finally agreed, though every word carried resistance. "Fine," he muttered, "but if we fail, I'm not dying for you." Thomas exhaled in relief, tension breaking for the first time. He replied softly, "I just need a chance." The two men, broken in different ways, found themselves bound together by fear and necessity. Jake's voice was sharp, "Don't trust me too much. I'm not your savior." The narrator emphasized how their fragile alliance felt like stepping into quicksand. Every move dangerous, every breath uncertain. Yet even in the cracks of mistrust, a spark of solidarity began to form. The narrator revealed how the alliance began with Jake sending encrypted instructions. 1. His message blinked, "Burn every trace, start over now." Thomas typed quickly, muttering, "I don't have time for this." Jake's reply came sharp, "You don't have time not to." Thomas hesitated, realizing the cost, erasing parts of his life to protect what remained. He slammed his fist on the desk, whispering, "I can't keep losing everything." The weight of the decision pressed down like chains. The narrator explained how trust was fragile, but survival demanded sacrifice. The alliance had begun with pain, and it would only grow heavier. The narrator described how, for the first time, Thomas felt less alone. Jake's voice, reluctant yet steady, guided him through the chaos. "Follow me, and maybe you'll live," Jake said. Thomas nodded silently, his heart heavy but determined. He whispered, "Then let's fight." The weight of fear remained, but the bond of necessity steadied his resolve. Two fractured men, one haunted by betrayal and the other by guilt, now walked into a war none of them wanted. The narrator closed the moment with the truth. Alliances born in fear are fragile, but sometimes they are the only way to survive. The narrator explained how Thomas and Jake realized they could not outmaneuver the hackers alone. A new figure appeared in the shadows of the digital war, Dr. Howard, a mentor from Thomas's past. His voice came through with calm certainty. You've stepped into a game far larger than you imagine. Thomas clenched his jaw, whispering, "Why are you here now?" Howard replied smoothly, "Because survival requires wisdom you lack." The narrator described how Thomas felt both relief and suspicion. The lines between ally and manipulator blurred. He muttered, "I'll listen, but I won't follow blindly." Still, the presence of an older guide lit a fragile path forward. The narrator revealed how Howard's words dripped with both wisdom and calculation. "If you want to live, you'll obey without hesitation," he said, his tone commanding. Thomas bristled, muttering, "I've been controlled enough." Howard's glasses glinted in the dim light as he continued, "Control is survival. Freedom will kill you." Jake's voice cut in from the background, sharp and distrustful. "Why should we trust you?" Howard's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Because I know them better than anyone. I once stood among them." The revelation hit like a thunderclap, leaving Thomas frozen in disbelief. Howard leaned closer, voice lowering into a tone that felt like both confession and manipulation. "I built the very systems they use against you," he admitted. The narrator emphasized how Thomas's mind reeled, torn between fear and reluctant respect. Jake muttered, "This is insane. We're listening to a traitor." Howard raised a hand calmly, his eyes sharp. "A traitor? Yes, but to them, not to you." Thomas whispered, "Or maybe to both." His pulse quickened, unsure if this man offered salvation or ruin. The narrator described the fragile tension, trust balanced on the edge of a knife. Howard typed rapidly, sending files across the encrypted channel. "This is their weakness," he said, tone confident, "but it will cost you dearly." Thomas scanned the documents, his breath quickening as he realized the depth of what he faced. Jake shook his head, muttering, "This feels like a trap." Howard's calm voice cut through, "Survival always feels like a trap." The narrator explained how the weight of the decision pressed on Thomas, forcing him to question if guidance from a manipulator was better than no guidance at all. He whispered, "I don't know if I can trust you." The narrator captured the turning point. Howard leaned back, voice calm. "You will survive, but only if you obey my every word." Thomas swallowed hard, muttering, "Obedience isn't survival, it's surrender." Jake smirked bitterly. "Now you see the price?" Howard's face remained unreadable, his silence heavier than threats. Thomas felt his resolve quake, knowing he was being pulled deeper into a web of lies and half-truths. Yet he also knew that without this deceptive mentor, his chances of survival shrank to none. He whispered, "I'll take the risk." The narrator noted how fragile hope had been twisted into dangerous reliance. The narrator described how the fragile alliances collapsed as the hackers unleashed their full force. Thomas's computer screens exploded with cascading code, red warnings flashing like alarms. He shouted, "They're inside everything." Jake scrambled beside him, hands flying across the keyboard, muttering curses. Howard stood still, unnervingly calm, whispering, "This is their strike." Thomas's chest tightened, realizing this was the moment they had been waiting for. His voice cracked, "Woo, can't hold them off." Yet beneath the panic flickered a stubborn fire. The narrator emphasized how fear, betrayal, and defiance collided, pulling Thomas to the edge of his breaking point. The narrator explained how the attack turned physical as Thomas's phone buzzed, showing live footage of strangers outside his building. He gasped, "They've found me." Jake cursed under his breath, muttering, "It's over." Howard's voice cut sharply, "No, it's just beginning." Thomas's pulse thundered as he pulled the blinds, shadows stretching across his pale face. He whispered, "They're here." The narrator revealed how every breath felt stolen, every second stretched thin. Betrayal hung heavy in the air. The suspicion that Howard had led them here gnawed at Thomas's chest. The war was no longer digital. It was at his doorstep. The narrator captured the moment when trust fractured. Jake spun toward Howard, shouting, "You brought them here." Howard's calm tone sliced through. "I am the reason you're alive this long." Thomas stood frozen, his mind splitting under suspicion. He whispered, "Who's betraying who?" The room vibrated with tension, three men locked in a fragile triangle of fear. Howard's gaze remained steady, unreadable, while Jake's anger boiled over. The narrator revealed how Thomas's heart hammered, caught between choosing who to trust and who to fight. His hands shook, hovering over the keyboard, whispering, "Tell me the truth." The narrator described how the climax reached fever pitch when the monitors flickered, and a voice spoke through the speakers, distorted and cruel. "Who own you?" Thomas recoiled, sweat dripping down his temple, whispering, "No, I'm not yours." Jake gritted his teeth, typing desperately, muttering, "I can shut them out." Howard's lips curved faintly, as if savoring the chaos. Thomas slammed his fist against the desk, shouting, "This ends now." The narrator explained how the fear twisted into rage, giving Thomas the courage to resist even as the walls of his world collapsed. The fight for survival became the fight for his soul. The narrator revealed how the storm broke in a single moment of raw defiance. Thomas shouted, "You don't control me," and slammed the power switch, plunging the room into darkness. Silence crashed in, broken only by heavy breaths. Jake whispered, "You just killed us," his voice trembling. Howard's calm reply followed, "Or saved us." The weight of every betrayal, fear, and secret hung heavy in the dark. Thomas sat in silence, chest heaving, realizing he had chosen defiance over submission. The narrator closed with truth. The climax was not victory, but the burning choice to fight, no matter the cost. The narrator described how silence consumed the room after the blackout, broken only by labored breaths. Thomas sat slumped in his chair, the weight of his defiance pressing down. He whispered, "I chose to fight, even if it kills me." Jake's voice trembled, "You don't know what you've done." Howard stood calm in the shadows, his face unreadable, saying, "The choice was necessary." Thomas's chest rose and fell, fear colliding with fragile relief. He muttered, "They no longer own me." The narrator explained how, for the first time, defiance outweighed fear, even as the cost lingered heavy in the dark. The narrator revealed how the fallout cut deep. Thomas stared at the photo of his sister, the fragile anchor to his crumbling world. His lips trembled as he whispered, "I didn't fail you." Jake muttered bitterly, "This isn't over, they'll be back." Howard's calm voice carried a warning, "Survival is not victory." Thomas clenched the photo, eyes burning with grief and determination. The narrator described how the weight of loss fused with his new resolve, shaping him into something harder. He whispered, "Let them come." In that moment, Thomas was no longer just hunted, he had become the survivor who would not yield. The narrator described how trust unraveled further. Jake paced, glaring at Howard, muttering, "We're nothing but pawns to you." Howard's voice was smooth, almost cold. Pawns live longer when they obey. Thomas's jaw clenched as suspicion gnawed. He whispered, "You helped us, but at what cost?" Howard's eyes narrowed, hiding secrets behind calm composure. The room thickened with tension, three men bound together yet divided by mistrust. The narrator revealed how Thomas understood one truth: he could not walk away unchanged. He whispered to himself, "The war isn't over. It's inside me now." The narrator explained how Thomas stepped outside into the night, the air sharp and cold against his skin. The city lights flickered like distant fires, indifferent to his suffering. He muttered, "They won't break me." Jake followed, his voice low, "We're still marked men." Howard lingered at the doorway, watching in silence, his shadow stretching long. The narrator revealed how Thomas felt the world had shifted irreversibly. He was still hunted, still scarred, but he carried something new, an unyielding will. He whispered, "They wanted fear. I'll give them war." The night swallowed his words, carrying them into the darkness. The narrator closed with a haunting truth. Thomas stood beneath a flickering streetlight, his breath fogging in the cold air. He whispered, "The hunt never ends." Jake looked at him, eyes wide with fear, while Howard remained unreadable in the shadows. The silence stretched, more powerful than words. The narrator emphasized how the story did not end with victory or defeat, but with a final echo, survival at a terrible cost. Thomas lowered his head, the weight of scars pressing down, but his eyes glowed with unbroken fire. The screen faded as his final words lingered. "Thou'll remember me."